Hello everyone and welcome into our first prediction video of the election season. These are going to come at many times during the campaign. I'm going to do them for Senate races, for interesting House races I see that pop up, and of course the presidential contest, all of the primaries and caucuses. Lord, it's going to be a long primary season. And of course the general election. So, a quick note, for those of you who do not know, CNN, the Des Moines Register, and Seltzer International were scheduled to release the gold standard of Iowa polls at 8 Central tonight. They announced just a few minutes before they were supposed to release it, due to an issue that someone who had been polled raised. It was brought to their attention. It brought into the question the legitimacy of the results, and out of abundance of caution, they spiked the poll. Now, according to Jim Martin's reporting and a correspondent for Bloomberg News, what happened was a gentleman was polled and he was read off a list of candidates. The candidate he wanted to caucus for was not included. Now, this is not like he was caucusing for Michael Bennet or John Delaney. He was going to caucus, and is caucusing on Monday night, for Pete Buttigieg, one of the top candidates in this race. Very well could win the race. And the Buttigieg campaign brought this to the attention of Seltzer, the Des Moines Register, and CNN. Out of abundance of caution, they all, as I said, decided to spike the poll. I tend to believe that, one, they hyped this all day and have been hyping it for days. That this had to be brought to their attention within the past few hours. And when they looked at it and looked at the results, they had to be such a red flag that was raised by the results that they said, oh my God, we can't release this. Because and knowing there was the issue, and knowing the ramifications in 2016 where polling was brought into question, and the national polls were right in 2016, by the way. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by the percentage that the most accurate polls within their margin of error showed she would win. Where they got them wrong in 2016 was in the state polls. And even those national polls pointed to a possible outcome that occurred. So, but I tend to believe that those numbers, when they looked at them and knew the issue, had to point to such a red flag that, oh my. Just out of curiosity, I would love for CNN and the Des Moines Register and Seltzer, after the caucuses, to release those numbers. And there should be a total investigation, as I've said, by them to find out what happened. Because this is totally unacceptable. So, end of rant. Iowa is a caucus state. People will go to their caucus site on Monday And they'll hear speeches, first by their local precinct chairman, someone from the county Democratic Party, and they'll be pitched for a donation to the state party, help fund these type of things, because the parties fund primaries and caucuses. So they'll go to their caucus site. They will then hear speeches by the precinct captain, and they will then get into groups. If your candidate gets 15%, meets the 15% threshold, you get a card, you cannot change, you leave if you want to. Because your candidate has got state delegate equivalents with the 15%. If your candidate gets below that, y'all have to regroup and go to another candidate that met the threshold. And after that, that's it. There's 2 realignments this time. 2. In the past, there were many. This time, there's 2. So, a big thing to look in Iowa is who the second place pick is. Now, a lot of polls show that is Elizabeth Warren. That's a lot of voters' second pick. And the polls have been all over the place lately. Some say Biden, some say Sanders, some have said Buttigieg within the past month, some have said pretty much a tie, a 3 to 4-way tie. We've seen 2, 3. It's a mess. I think 2 factors you need to remember. Look at the trend and consistency. It's been pretty consistent since this contest got underway, nationally at least. But Joe Biden has been the leader. There's been times where he's dipped and dathered and got a run for his money. But pretty consistently, he bounces back. And that's been the case in Iowa. But the biggest thing in politics is momentum. So, I'll explain first who I think is going to win the Iowa caucuses. Then I'll explain who I would caucus for and why I would caucus for them. So, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be really close. But if you had to put a bat to my head, this is who I would say would win on Monday night. Yeah, this guy, Bernie Sanders. As I've said, he has the momentum. He has the momentum on his side. A lot of polls, recent polls, have shown Sanders with the lead, and he's been gaining, even in the polls where he's not beating Biden. You go back and look at previous polls, I mean, he is gaining. So, and he has money. And he has spent a lot of money. And as I mentioned in my Stay the Race video, he has a huge Get Out the Vote organization. And something about Sanders voters you need to realize. They are dyed in the wool. They are gung-ho for Bernie. They are as gung-ho for Bernie as Trump voters are for Trump. They are committed. So, Sanders, in my humble opinion, wins. Because if you get to that realignment phase and you have a candidate like Andrew Yang who doesn't place, even though they've not announced a coalition, Andrew Yang has even said that he thinks his voters would go to Sanders. I think if you get into a situation in some caucus sites where Elizabeth Warren doesn't meet the 15% threshold, I don't think they're going to some of the more moderate candidates. I honestly think they go to Bernie. And I mean, there's not a lot of daylight between Bernie and Elizabeth Warren at all. So, Bernie, in my opinion, wins. But it's close. Second place, I think, is a huge pileup. Between between Biden, Buttigieg, and Warren. I'd have to give a slight edge to Biden. Just because of how well he's polling in second place in most of the polls. And I think you're going to get in people that go into the caucus site, and they're going to sit down and they say, you know, I like Mayor Pete and I like Amy Klobuchar. But this is about being president. And this is about beating Donald Trump. And they're going to go with Joe Biden. They may have had Amy and Pete at their house and have raised money for them. But when it's time to go make that decision, they go for Joe. I think Pete probably finishes third. Very close third, by the way. I think Elizabeth Warren finishes fourth. I think Warren's probably been hurt the most by the impeachment trial. Her and Klobuchar. But Klobuchar, I think, has come on strong here at the end. And could actually do better than people were expecting. But in my opinion, Warren's been hurt the most. Because Klobuchar has a lot of local endorsements. And those have been her surrogates. And those help. While Elizabeth Warren has some high-profile surrogates that those of us who pay attention to politics on a daily basis might be razzle-dazzled by and go out and see a speech given by them or be like, oh my. Your average voter, I don't think is. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, for his block of voters, and even voters who aren't in his camp, surrogates are pretty impressive. Yes, Michael Moore, who attracts a certain segment of voters, but he has. And look, I understand. A lot of this is Fox News boogeyman type stuff. But AOC is a rock star inside the Democratic Party. And she's been campaigning hard for Bernie, along with two of her squad mates. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. I just think that Sanders' surrogates have been a bigger asset to him while he's been in Washington with the impeachment trial. And trust me, he's made no secret about how much he detests being in Washington for the Senate trial. So I think Sanders pulls it off. Now, if I were going to be caucusing on Monday night, I lived in Iowa, who would I vote for? Who would I caucus for? And I'm leaning towards this as an overall, this is my endorsement. I'm not there yet, but I'm really close. And in the interest of full disclosure, the person's picture I'm about to show, I have donated to their campaign. Donated $35 to it, total. So, here's who I would caucus for on Monday night. That's right. That man right there. Joe Biden. Get you someone that looks at you the way Joe Biden is looking at that ice cream cone. And boy, he is double fisting that $20. Rocking those aviator sunglasses. And that badass watch. Folks, I don't think Bernie Sanders can beat Donald Trump. And that, to me, is the number one issue. Sanders also scares me on a lot of issues. I have employee-provided health insurance. My employer, I have it employer-provided. Bernie Sanders is trying to take that away from me. I like my employer-provided health care. It's relatively inexpensive. I have a health savings account as well. Have good dental coverage, vision insurance, all employee provided. I like all of those things. And Bernie Sanders is trying to take them away. And Joe Biden is saying that, if Jake wants to keep his, he can. But for those who don't want to have that option or would like this other plan, they can get the public option. I think that's a much better solution. And look, we have to fix healthcare in this country. It is an absolute disaster. And I don't think that Bernie Sanders is willing to make the compromises necessary to fix the problem. That's another thing about Sanders that I cannot stand, is he is immune to compromise. We have had for 4 years a president who refuses to compromise, refuses to admit he's wrong. A huge disruptive force in American politics. We cannot take 4 more years of the same and for it to be a total. We can't take go from the huge right shift we took with Trump over to this huge left shift with Bernie. Now, granted, when you get down to it, there's not a lot of gulf between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders when you boil down to some of the basic economic issues. They support some of the same things, they just call them different things. But Joe Biden, I believe, can bring the parties to the table and work out a solution. Now, granted, if it's either one of these men that's the nominee, you're going to have to pay major attention to who their running mate is. Because, no offense, Bernie Sanders will turn 80 in his first year in office. Joe Biden will turn 80 shortly after his first midterm. So, I suspect that if either one of them wins, just out of sheer health concerns, they'll have to announce that it's been a one-term deal. So you'll have to pay a close attention to their running mate. And I think Joe Biden could pick a running mate better than anyone. He knows what the job entails. He would empower his vice president. He knows when to give the vice president space. He knows when to rein them in. And he knows how to go about being there. Because he was. Let's not forget, for 8 years he stood shoulder to shoulder with Barack Obama as vice president. Barack Obama had some of the nicest things to say about Joe Biden that I've ever heard anyone say. And they were from the heart. So, I think that Joe, if I was caucusing, I would caucus for Joe. I like Pete. Pete's an inspirational candidate. He's a generational candidate. I never thought that I would get a chance to see a viable presidential candidate of my generation this early. And it has been inspiring. He's one of the most well-spoken politicians we've ever had. He has a good, long, promising future ahead of him. And I think he'd make a great vice president, defense secretary, or secretary of state in any administration come January 2021. Amy Klobuchar, I agree with her on more of the issues in this race than any of the candidates. But I don't know if she can pull together enough primary votes to win. I think she could win a general, but I don't know if she can pull enough primary votes to win. And I don't want Sanders to win the primary because Democrats are throwing their votes away and dividing ourselves like the Republicans did in 2016. They should. You need to at some point consolidate, and don't do it before it's too late. So that is my. And like I said, I think Amy Klobuchar could be a great member of the administration, vice presidential candidate. I think she'd probably be a better vice president. She's got over 100 bills passed. She's been incredibly successful. So, yeah. Elizabeth Warren, I think she's too much like Sanders. I don't think she's willing to compromise. I don't believe she's electable. I see Donald Trump just savagely going after Elizabeth Warren and attacking her character and integrity. So that is my belief on that. So here's my. And Andrew Yang has had a great campaign, very inspiring for someone that literally came out of nowhere to get where he's going to end up. Is pretty amazing. So, here's my final prediction on Iowa. I think Bernie wins a very close one. This guy is who I would caucus for. I think second, third, and fourth is pretty much a pile-up. Really a pile-up between 2 and 3. And we don't get a realignment after Iowa. All of the candidates live to fight another day. And we're off to New Hampshire. And we'll do this for New Hampshire as well. I will see y'all all tomorrow for This Day in History for Monday. So I'll see y'all then.